The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Friday, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. And it is the Friday edition of the Nerdcast News Report. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We are going to get you all set for the weekend by wrapping up all the important news stories from this week in our four topic areas. A lot of really interesting news to wrap up the week, including a big story on the PlayStation State of Play, which happened after we went off the air on Wednesday. But time to jump to our Friday news and get right onto it. And joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Yeah, happy Friday. We have made it through another week, and yeah, there's a lot to talk about today. Interesting news on all fronts, and excited to get started.
Yeah, we're going to jump right into it because, like Mike said, there is a lot to talk about, specifically about the State of Play, which occurred on Wednesday afternoon. It was interesting because it kind of felt like I don't want to say they snuck it in, but I feel like the news of the State of Play just kind of like jumped in there like Monday, like, hey, we're going to have this, make sure you join us. And they had a lot. And you know, I think, you know, you'll see a list of things on the screen of trailers they ran, news they dropped. It's a ton to go through, and certainly if you're a fan of PlayStation games, high level games in general, you're going to want to go back and probably watch the entire State of Play. We're not going to do that here because this is our short recap, basically, of what happened then at the State of Play, but that's, you know, why we are going to be here to try to break it down for you. And I know you had a chance to check it out, and there's some really interesting looking, especially third-party titles, I think was kind of the big takeaway, at least I had of this, that I think if you're looking for some big titles from other companies that are not only going to be on PlayStation 5, but across other PlayStation platforms and across other gaming platforms, I think there was a lot to like from the State of Play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to go into these, no matter what company it is and what's going to be announced, with no real expectations. There aren't a lot of major titles that I'm ultra anticipating where if they don't tell me about it, it's going to disappoint me. I think people who may have scored this a little lower probably had specific expectations that weren't met, and I think you're always going to run into that.
For sure.
But yeah, there were some definite really cool things that I'm kind of looking forward to now. Obviously the Monster Hunter Wilds game, it's coming up at the end of this month. That looks really cool. They announced that there's going to be spring and summer new content in the game that's going to be releasing, so they're going to be supporting that beyond release, which is really neat. Kind of for like the throwback retro crowd, the really cool looking new Shinobi game. First time Shinobi's had a new title since 2011 back on the 3DS, but this is just one of those like now popular stylized 2D action games made by the same people who did the revival of Streets of Rage 4 back in 2020. I think that'll be really cool. I was actually kind of surprised about the Digimon Story Time Stranger game. When they first started showing the trailer, before they revealed they were talking about Digimon, I was just like, oh, this looks really cool. Maybe kind of like a Persona-esque kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pop up, oh, it's Digimon. And yeah, I guess I'm a little excited about a Digimon game in 2025. I wasn't really expecting that. Other standouts that I thought were really cool, Lost Soul Aside, made by a Chinese company, really cool looking action game. Warriors Abyss, Dynasty Warriors meets a roguelite game. That should be pretty fun. Really excited about both the Onimusha 2 remaster and the new one coming out in 2026. You get to play as Miyamoto Musashi, which is really awesome. Another one that I'd not heard of until this State of Play was Tides of Annihilation. Really cool looking adventure game, takes place in kind of an alternate reality version of London. Looks like it has some just huge scale boss battles, kind of like Shadow of the Colossus-esque. I think that could be really cool coming up. And really kind of the main Sony studio game, like actually a company that works as a subsidiary of Sony. The game Saros, made by the makers of Returnal, the company's Housemarque. That looked pretty cool too. But yeah, not a whole lot on the first party Sony front, but kind of a good variety of stuff to look forward to.
And some of the things you mentioned are coming this year. Some of them are coming in 2026. And something like Tides of Annihilation, they don't have a release date set for that yet. So that's still a little ways down the road. Other things that certainly may interest people. I know we've already talked on this podcast about the Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater Edition. They've officially confirmed what was leaked a couple weeks ago that's going to be coming out in August. I think a lot of people are really excited about that. Otherwise, yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think people will be excited about another new Five Nights at Freddy's game. People really love that franchise. That's probably something that people are going to get excited about.
The other kind of sleeper hit that I failed to mention that I thought looked really cool watching the trailer is a game called The Midnight Walk. Called a cozy horror game made of clay.
Yeah.
Very much has this Tim Burton, if he made an Oddworld game kind of feel to it. It's a first-person shooter, but everything's claymation. It's also going to be a VR game, so that could be really, really wild and trippy, but that's coming out on May 8th, and I think that might be worth looking into as well.
Another, game that's certainly worth mentioning, we already knew was coming out, but there was an additional feature added to that, was the news about the island mode in WWE 2K25 having Paul Heyman come in. Of course, anytime you can have Paul Heyman involved in anything you're doing, you're probably winning.
They probably should have had him pitch some of the other games during the state of play. I thought that would have been really cool.
But that'll be coming out at launch, so if you're interested in the island of relevancy, if you will, you're going to be able to check that out. But it's really interesting to see the kind of a wide variety of things, but also a wide variety of platforms. I think we saw, I can't remember which game it was. We were looking at the trailer that's coming out on the VR2 as well.
Yeah, that was the Midnight Walk.
Yeah, so
a VR game.
That's pretty wild.
PSVR 2 definitely needs some more big titles, so hopefully that'll get people excited.
It's kind of interesting because I think Nintendo has kind of dominated the news cycle because everybody's excited for Switch 2 and everybody wants to see what that looks like. And of course, we still have a couple of months before we can really get a good idea of what all is there. There continues to be rumors leak out. So it was probably important for Sony to kind of come in and say, hey, we've still got some really good console stuff too. And a lot of this stuff's going to be available on Xbox and other consoles as well. So it's not just exclusive. Some of them are exclusive to PlayStation, but not all of them. A lot of them are very much across platforms. Yeah. But I think it was kind of important to stay. Hey, we still got some cool stuff too. Like it's not just everybody's excited about the Switch 2, but here's some really awesome stuff that I think you're going to really enjoy playing.
Well, I think you've kind of reached the midlife of the PS5, and I think it's to the point now where they've stumbled with some of their titles recently. Then they really kind of need some wins to stack up to really drive home both that this has been a successful console generation, but also to convince people that they need to buy the Pro. I think, I don't know what numbers are on it, but I've yet to really be enticed to want to jump up to that next stage of PS5, especially when you have a gaming PC. Like if I don't really know if I need to drop $700 on the next PlayStation, but if you can give me some titles that I want to play on my PlayStation that I know will be enhanced for that, maybe that might get me thinking the other way. We'll see. Well,
not only have they had some mishaps with their games, but obviously we just talked about the network itself going down and having to deal with that, and just general connection issues, as I talked about on Monday, where it's like I had to get a new router just so I could play PS5, a game that I physically own, that I have to get an internet connection to play. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think some positive news is probably much needed. And like you said, I know the PlayStation 5, the original version, the numbers did really strong sales during the holiday. There was a story talking about how well it did. So people were still buying it. I mean, I just bought mine over the holiday season, so I can attest to that. But like you said, the additional cost of the Pro and what you're actually getting for it, I think, unless you're just a hardcore gamer with money to spend, that you just don't mind dropping another $700 for another PlayStation, it's kind of hard to justify that additional cost. And I think it's it feels like I don't want to say they cheaped out, because obviously there are upgrades there, but it just doesn't feel like enough to entice somebody who already has a PlayStation 5 to go out and drop another $700 on another PlayStation 5.
I think we're at a point now where even full console generations, you feel like the return on the investment isn't quite what it used to be compared to, say, the 16-bit to the 32-bit era or 64 to 128. I think the margins are just getting thinner and thinner. So a half step up from current gen to current Gen 0.5, that's a tough sell.
It is. I mean, it's like generally technology across the board, where you're talking televisions, so you're talking your cell phones, like we've reached such a point that all these things are so good already that, you used to be, I would buy the new Galaxy phone, if not every model, probably every other model.
Sure.
Like, it was just, you just do that because there's some really cool things that are in there that you got to have. It's been like 4 or 5 models since I bought a new phone, and I'm not even really in a big hurry to go out and buy the next one, because we've kind of reached that point where it's like, you've done about all you can do with this stuff, and until you come up with some sort of new revolutionary technology that I have to have, I'm gonna enjoy not having a phone payment every month, and same thing with gaming. So, but again, some good news out of PlayStation. If you're a fan of the console, there's a lot of really cool stuff coming in 2025 and 2026. I encourage you to go back and watch the entire State of Play to kind of get a good look at all the trailers and all the news. And if there are titles that you're interested in, you can certainly check that out. But certainly very newsworthy. I think, like Mike said, unless you were looking for a specific title that they didn't talk about, then you might be a little disappointed. Otherwise, I think there's something in there for everybody. I know that's cliche, but I think that's probably true here. Let's jump to some other topics in our area of focus. And Animago had a video, if you will, on Monday where they had a live stream and went through some new titles that they have coming ahead. Of course, we just had Discotech and their stream last month, and now we have Animago, who's also kind of in the business of rescuing old anime licenses. So, they did announce a few things. Nothing to me as that I was like, oh man, I've got to go run out and grab this. But I think some people will be really excited, as you see, include the Blackjack OVA, the complete series. Romeo's Blue Skies, which I don't know anything about the show, but it's got a really good opening theme that we see a ton on lists. Sasuke, the 29 episode release of the 1968 anime, available in North America for the first time. Vampire Princess Miyu is probably one that people might remember. The OVA being remastered in HD for the first time. And then a couple of other things, some release dates on Nobody's Boy Remy, Full Moon of Sagashite's Blu-ray coming up later this year. And then maybe the most interesting piece of the stream was the news that they are doing a documentary series called The Anime Business, that they're going to interview important figures in the Western anime history and basically kind of talk about how it got started, how their companies build up, kind of take you through the history of all that, which I think, if done right, could be really, really interesting. But kind of what did you take away from the whole stream, if you will?
Yeah, I'm always excited when any company goes through the history books and finds these shows and brings them back to life. Certainly in physical formats, even better. And I find myself looking at these and thinking, if the price is right, they don't have to be a slam dunk for me to want to support them, because I want these things preserved too, to some degree.
Yes.
And you're glad that there are companies out there doing it. So things like Blackjack, Vampire Princess Miyu, Romeo's Blue Skies, I could definitely see wanting to check those out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I anxiously await every new update that we get from these guys. The more the merrier.
Yeah, and the other thing we talked about a little bit around the holidays, but I think something to remind people is they also have a anime store at MediaOCD.com that they are kind of building up. It originally, I think, was kind of more adult titles, but now they are carrying non-adult titles there as well. And I think anything that drives a little business away from the Crunchyroll store is a good thing. And they had some decent deals around Christmas time, and I think if that continues to do well for them and they can build that up to be kind of the new right stuff, I think that's great for everybody over here because, like you said, we love to support physical releases, and it gets harder and harder to do with Crunchyroll because of they just don't really offer you any kind of deals, not like High Dive does. So
speaking of that, I did find out yesterday that Sentai Filmworks is having a Valentine's Day sale.
There you go.
They mark down their stuff pretty frequently, so this is definitely worth checking out. It looks like a lot of them are kind of on sale right now, or like their romantic comedy type shows. Let's see. Yeah, I started watching The Dangers in My Heart. I definitely think that's one that is worth buying at a discounted rate. Domestic Girlfriend's got a great open. Just take a look. Check out SentaiFilmworks.com. Check out their store. Support these guys because, man, they're always trying to give you a good value.
Yeah, and they're giving you physical releases for stuff, and they're doing it at a great price, and that is absolutely worth supporting in the industry. So, yeah, absolutely. Definitely go check those guys out in their Valentine's Day sale. Moving on to some more anime news. This is just kind of interesting to me because we have kind of talked about this company that's involved in this recently, a company that we'd never heard of, and now they're showing up again. But the news that Parrot Analytics and Azuki have announced a new partnership to launch a data-driven global anime ranking chart akin to the Billboard Hot 100. The top 40 anime chart will track the most in-demand anime titles globally, basically creating this chart that's going to be able to see what the hot shows are. What's interesting, there's so many things interesting about this article.
Yeah.
It's so many layers of it.
A lot to unpack.
Number one, you have this Azuki company, again, which was involved with the anime.com thing we just talked about, which may or may not be involved in some sort of global, like, cryptocurrency, Web3.
They do have their own anime coin, and there is also Anime Chain, which they're building out apparently. So that's all a thing.
Yeah, so they're involved in that. The other thing that's interesting is they also have, as you see on screen, kind of a top 5 of the hot shows, so things that are maybe spiking in the month. But the other thing that's really interesting to me, and I'm not sure yet really how I feel about it, as we're going to scroll down this list of the top 40 while we talk about it, is this list tracks pirated streams in addition to legitimate streams, which I'm still kind of perplexed as to how I feel about all that.
Yeah, I would really love to see their formula for how they weight this and how they compile all this data to come up with this multiplier that kind of shows you how trending a show is. But according to the article, the metric that they use, the demand metric, includes things like official streaming and download data, pirated streaming and download data, engagement through search engines, wiki sites, critic and rating sites, social media platforms. It outputs a multiplier representing how many times a TV series or movie is more in demand than the average title within the same period. So there's clearly some big math going on there. But yeah, I do think it's a little interesting that, for one, they include pirated data where, maybe if I'm an anime production company, maybe I want to know how well my show's trending, but I don't know if I necessarily want people... I don't know if I want that data from illegal means to count toward that, because that's not helping me a whole lot.
Right.
Secondly, they include social media engagement. So every day I could go online and talk about how much I hate X anime, and that could actually be feeding it the data that's showing this thing's trending even more. So my hatred could actually propel a show higher in the rankings.
Not to be confused with X, the anime, because that is...
that's
totally different.
I really enjoyed X, the anime. the movie was a little rough, but the anime was really good.
But yeah, 100%. And, I wonder... Because you think about it and you try to logically put it together. If you're a company and you get this data about how much your show is being pirated, is it a way for the anime studio to say, or the creator maybe to say, like, hey, people really love my work. You guys just suck at protecting it. You need to do a better job, because there's 10 million people pirating every episode. So people are dying to see this, and you guys can't figure out how to keep them from doing it illegally. That's on you. Or will we see lawsuits where creators of shows will sue production companies for lost revenue because it's like, hey, we can legitimately see through these rankings that 10 million people a week are, streaming Dragon Ball Daima on, some sort of 420 light 'em up anime.com. Like, I don't know if that's a website, but probably. So you need to pay me for the revenues that are lost because you guys didn't protect my intellectual property. Like, is that going to be the next step in the process?
I mean, we've seen how difficult it is for them, even once they've identified where these things are being illegally distributed, how difficult it is for them to do anything about it. So I think that's going to be a challenge, and I have to think the creators know that this is such an uphill battle. But it creates some interesting problems. But overall, if you take away the NFTs for Fate, Strange, whatever it is, Strange Fake, and all the stuff around it, I love the idea of some sort of official anime chart. I think it's something that will be fun to watch each month as it goes, what changes happen, and really, for me, what new shows track well, because you have kind of the old shows that seem to just hang out all the time. I mean, One Piece obviously is still ongoing, but it's number 5. You got Attack on Titan, number 4. Naruto, number 16.
Yeah.
You got these legacy shows that just kind of hang on. But to me, the important thing is, what are the new shows that are breaking through and reaching the top? Because at the very least, they're buzzing.
Yeah, I think that's, I mentioned on Discord last night, the one thing I would like to see is a separate list of only shows that aired, and like either they're ongoing, like your Detective Conan, stuff like that, just continue on and on forever, or shows that have aired in the last 2 seasons, either the current season or the previous season.
Yeah.
Because, Dragon Ball Z's on there. Like, I'm sure there's somebody out there still streaming all those episodes of Dragon Ball Z and people still talking about it, but it's not a current show. They're not making any more of that. Like,
No.
that is gone. Like, what do I, what useful information is there to know that that's still that popular, other than, what it's going to encourage is more remakes. So it's like, oh, well, Naruto's still number 16, so we need to make 10 more Naruto series because people are still so excited, or we need to do a Naruto remake.
Well, what I think we've talked about in the past, where these companies are talking about doing a lot more reboots and taking proven IPs and continuing them on. I have to wonder, too, when I look at the list, you have Bleach, 1,000 Year Blood War at number 10, and then Bleach at number 12. How do they know to differentiate when someone's talking about Bleach, but they're talking about 1,000 Year Blood War as opposed to the original run of the series? That seems kind of out there.
There are lots of questions. I don't know if we'll ever kind of get into the weeds on exactly how this is all put together, but if we can find maybe a little more of a breakdown on what got them to this point, we'll definitely talk about it again. And as with this updates every month, if we can find a way to kind of keep tabs on it, we'll bring it up and mention it. But
I feel like we'll be talking about Azuki for a while now.
Sounds like quite often, since we've done it twice this week.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that they're going to keep popping up in places, which may be a good thing, and maybe it's not a good thing. I guess we'll find out. Let's get to one wrestling-related news story before we wrap up this edition of the Nerdcast News Report. And it's some good news on the front of WWE, and it's something we speculated on in a previous episode when we talked about potential former wrestlers that could be in line for a Hall of Fame induction. And the news came out this week, the Demolition, one of the classic tag teams of the 80s and early 90s, have signed a Legends deal with WWE. Bill Eadie and Barry Darsow making up the classic lineup of Demolition. And, there were several things that happened. The biggest thing was the fact that they were involved in the concussion lawsuit against WWE, which kind of a lot of those people were kind of blackballed from the company once they were involved, somewhat understandably. But once that was dropped, and obviously the regime change in WWE, it's been very clear that WWE's been interested in mending fences with a lot of these people, and Demolition is now the latest. It's hard to talk about the history of tag team wrestling in WWE without mentioning these guys. You have to think that this is the first step in potentially putting them in the Hall of Fame, maybe as soon as this year.
Yeah, this feels like it's been a long time coming. I think it's unfortunate that they weren't on good terms with the company when New Day was really on their big run as longest reigning tag champions. I think that could have been a really cool, or was the Usos that did that? I can't remember now. Whoever it was that had the really long...
New Day.
Okay. I knew it was one of the two kind of premier tag teams in recent history. But, it would have been cool for them to be involved around that time. These guys, if you were a fan in the 80s, you certainly knew them. Someone like Barry Darsow, guy did anything you asked of him. Went on to play the Repo Man. Really excited to see this. It'll be cool to have them as playable characters in video games moving forward, action figures, and hopefully this will all end in them being inducted in the Hall of Fame. I think it's certainly well past due.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think this is going to be just a continued thing. We're going to see that a lot of these guys that were with the outs or on the outs with WWE are going to try to be brought back in the fold if they're interested in coming back. And I think this is a chance for these guys to be honored in the proper way as trailblazers of tag team wrestling and just try to make this stuff right all these years later. Really exciting news. Again, it's kind of a no-brainer, but, you just wondered for some of these guys whether that would ever happen, and now we're starting to see it happen. So
it really feels like when you talk about this, you talk about bringing back Jesse Ventura for commentary. It feels like the people at the top have a much greater respect for those who came before them and just the industry in general than maybe the guy that built the whole thing.
Yes, for sure. There's no question about that. So I think we're going to see more cool stuff like this happen, and I'm all for it for sure. Let's wrap things up with the Empire Express. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. Pokemon Go and Major League Baseball have announced that events will be held at select MLB stadiums during games throughout the 2025 season. No date has been announced for Cincinnati, but is this a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you can get people going to Major League Baseball games for one, and also maybe driving more revenue for Pokemon Go. I think after the pandemic, things have kind of taken a dip, but it could be a good thing for both companies. Another rough week for AEW Dynamite in the go-home show for the Australia event. The show drew just 579,000 viewers and a .16 in the demo. That viewership is down 27% year over year. According to WrestleNomics, should they be concerned?
Should be. I don't know if they are or not because it's Tony Khan and he can spend whatever money he wants, but that combined with overcharging people for this Australia event and now coming back and giving discounted tickets at the end, and it's not a pay-per-view and all this other stuff, like things are not going well for this company right now. Meanwhile, NXT, featuring the debut of Ricky Starks, a show-ending angle from Shawn Spears and an Ethan Page package, drew 801,000 viewers and a .18 in the demo. Will AEW Dynamite ever beat NXT in total viewership again?
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know if they knew it at the time, but I think AEW made a big mistake by hyping and celebrating their victories over NXT during the Wednesday Night War. I think they've signaled to people that, at best, they are as good as the C show for WWE. Unfortunately, they're heading in diverging paths right now. I'm never going to say never, but right now it's looking pretty bleak for them. Former TNA wrestler Josh Alexander has hired Barry Bloom as his agent, who represents several AEW wrestlers. Do you think that's where he's headed?
Probably so, and I'm not even sure that's a bad move for him. I think WWE is very full at the moment. Would I be excited if he shows up in NXT to help Ethan Page? Absolutely, but he's a guy that I think has aspirations to be in the G1, and I think Tony Khan needs a victory when it comes to a free agent because he hasn't had many lately. So I could see him dropping the bank on top of Josh Alexander and bringing him over. But we'll see. You never know. But it seems like the tea leaves are kind of headed in that direction. Finally, a reporting Game Rant cited a leaker that stated that the rumored Final Fantasy IX remake won't come out until 2026. Excited for this one? Kind of wondering why it hasn't even been announced yet?
I'm certainly excited for it. My only concern is that the further out this goes, the more likely it's either A, going to be canceled, or B, it's going to be so overproduced that it ends up being like a Final Fantasy VII remake or rebirth, which I don't want. Give me like an HD 2D remake, and that's all I need for Final Fantasy IX.
We'll see. Like I said, Square Enix hasn't even announced that it exists, but supposedly work's been going on. The rumor started, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, so it's kind of one of those things that's been in the shadows, but
I think there was like an NVIDIA leak that had a bunch of game titles, and I think that was where it originated, where people saw that name out there, and Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we'll get more news on it later in 2025. That's going to wrap things up for this week's editions of the Nerdcast News Report. Glad you joined us this week for all the latest news. You're all set now and ready to go for your weekend. We'll be back this Sunday night for another episode of Music Weekly. It'll be the music of January the 31st coming up this weekend. Join us 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Sunday night. And then Monday morning, we'll get your week started with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. And we're going to move the Nerdcast News Report across the week to 8:30 a.m. So join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern, Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week. We will get you started with all the weekend's news on the Nerdcast News Report. Big thanks to Rachel for joining us in the chat. Big thanks to Mike for joining me in studio. And a big thanks to you for joining us wherever you may be listening to this podcast. That's going to wrap things up. For the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.